I'm joined by three gentlemen: Shadrach Baa-Naa Kundi, Director of Operations and Research, African Center for International Affairs, Accra, Ghana. We also have Dr. Sam Amadi, Director, the Abuja School of Social and Political Thought in Abuja, Nigeria, and Dr. Abu Bakarr Bah, Presidential Research Professor of Sociology, Northern Illinois University, USA. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining me at this time.
Thank you very much.
All right, so let me begin. It's a pleasure. So let me begin with you, Shadrach. Now, I know you've been closely following this, particular story, the topic, and everything. Now, the African Union has actually warned that any attempt to divide Sudan further will undermine its unity. Now, can you help us unpack what this means for the region's broader commitment to stability?
Yeah, so basically the issue regarding instability and also state is one thing that it's dear to various countries across the world. And when you look at the 1933 Montevideo Convention on Rights and Duties of States, it implies that states should have certain criteria or certain characterization in order to be able to call it states. Under circumstances where a state is dividing its sovereignty, it means that that state does not have sovereignty in itself. So the African Union's position saying that any further action that will create some sort of a parallel government does not inure to the benefit of the broader community in terms of how the system is structured, in terms of we having government forces also fighting some group of people, that's the RSF acts against the Sudanese armed forces. So if this happens and it goes without condemnation by the African Union, it will be a precedent that other groups may want to follow as a means towards establishing rule or establishing statehood within a state. Establishing statehood within a state may imply dividing sovereignty. And sovereignty is something that the state cannot share or it cannot be divided. So the position that the EU takes is in direct conformity with international law and is in direct conformity to the whole idea of sovereignty.
All right. Now, Dr. Bah, with the AU rejecting the parallel government outrightly, what mechanisms should be put in place by, international institutions like the UN to ensure that only the legitimate government is recognized?
That is really almost like a moot point to some degree, because when you talk of really the sovereignty of countries, I think you have to think of really two things here. One is, what you can call legal or theoretical sovereignty, and the other one is a practical sovereignty. And Sudan is actually facing a situation in which it doesn't have practical sovereignty. That is to say, when you do have, a significant part of the country occupied by, an anti-government military force, in this case, the RSF, and the government doesn't have, any control there. So in a sense, at the moment at least, it doesn't have sovereignty in that sense. Now, what is happening politically, in terms of like declaring, state governments and so forth, that is really just, what I would say, that is just politics. Of course, the AU and others have to come and say, well, we don't support that, which is normal. But really, the real issue really is what is happening on the ground. All of those statements are just political blusters. They are just, regional politics. They are part of really just, I guess, what I can call, the showmanship really of war. I think if Sudan actually regains its territory, if the Sudanese government regains territory on the ground, then the question about who declares sovereignty or not becomes really a moot point.
Okay. Now, Dr. Amadi, you've heard what Dr. Bah said, and he talked about, Sudan not really having practical sovereignty. Now, the RSF presents its parallel government as a peace and unity initiative. In your assessment, is this a genuine attempt, at reconciliation, or is it a strategic move to gain political legitimacy?
Well, I think it's more of a strategic move. By the way, if you look at the history of this struggle, of this conflict, it doesn't look like a principled conflict in the sense we've seen, meaning perhaps two different versions of the states, two ideas about governance, and then people fought or fight because they are divided genuinely around how to solve a social problem. This is not like two elites who have been involved in this struggle for long, worked or fought together as comrades, and then disagreed on how to share the spoil of office. And again, so this is typical of some African conflicts. They are conflicts that you see identical issues, ethnic issues, and economic struggle for access to resources and power quest, raw power, primitive quest for power, kind of conflicting. So at that point, I think what the RSF, perhaps wants is to be part of, to take control, to part of the governance. Again, it's strategic, but it can actually be a process for solving the problem where, it's not globally. We are Russia, transnational leaders can actually use transactions to solve a problem. So from a personal perspective, RSF is looking for to be in power, not necessarily that think that this will solve any problem in terms of a strategic principled way. But at the same time, you probably have to consider that if Sudan has not maintained the level of international concern, especially all the wars breaking out in more important places to powerful geopolitical considerations. So it's not unreasonable, I think, to pay attention to what they are saying, because you are in a place where looks like a war without control, no dominance. RSF is strong enough to keep on waging wars and perhaps gaining some momentum, and the Sudan armed forces not able to repel them comprehensively. So the answer is, this is the same crisis of leaders who are involved in some kind of guerrilla or revolutionary wars themselves, fighting themselves as to who controls the power as the proxy for who controls access to resources.
Okay. Now, what is the impact, this is for you, Shadrach, what is the impact on national unity, especially when recent polls suggest that nearly 55% of the population feel disconnected from current leadership?
It's usually a normal feeling for war-torn countries, especially when there are deep forces who seem to represent a group of people or a group of geographical areas able to capture those areas. So it's normal that they feel some form of alliance or they feel some form of allegiance to a particular group of people. But the larger the grand scheme of things remains that who holds legitimacy with regards to recognition by the international community. That makes a big difference. And the move by the RSF is to grant it more diplomatic score on the table for them to be able to negotiate very well when it comes to the issue of negotiation for power. But when it comes to the citizenry, the broader picture should be those who are able to protect them, those who are able to grant them some level of respite in terms of their plight at the moment. Those are the group of people that they are going to lay their allegiance or they are going to support at the moment. But the issue still remains as to whom the international community will support, whom the international community will be willing to align and also have further conversation when it comes to the protection of the social contract and the expansion of the social contract of the people. Okay. But at the moment, those that will put in the efforts to give them some level of respite will be those people that the nationals will swear their allegiance to.
All right, now let's hear from Dr. Bah. Now, in addition to the people feeling disconnected with the current leadership, surveys also indicate that a significant portion of the Sudanese public figures, from some regions suggest as high as 40 to 55% is also confused about which government to support, if it's the, RSF or the government at hand. So how could this divide affect everyday governance and social trust?
So it's unfortunate that the Sudanese haven't really been able to implement the Juba Peace Agreement because the Juba Peace Agreement really, outlined the issues that underlines the war, and I think it's useful to refer to the surveys and all those kind of expressions of sentiments. But wherever you have war, especially of these kinds of things, there are really two things going on. Most at least, one is the identity politics and the manipulations of identities, and the other one is the political economy, that is the way resources are used in financing and perpetuating violence and wars. And I think that's really where the issues are. That's what needs to be addressed. The issues of identity, political representations of different groups. When you do have a multi-ethnic country like Sudan that is highly diverse, ultimately the solutions have to be in the political arrangement that accounts for those differences. Along with that, of course, you have to understand that war breeds economies. It is to say, economies of violence, supplies of weapons, who is connected and who is not connected. And those things also fuel that. So on the one hand, you do have like legitimate grievances about identity and representations. On the other one, you do have banditry going on by warlord and war entrepreneurs. And Sudan actually seems to be caught in both of those.
All right. Now, back to you, Dr. Amadi. Do you have an idea of signals, that is being received from Sudan's neighbors and also regional blocs? And do you think that this internal split could be leveraged by external actors, potentially destabilizing the Horn of Africa further?
Yes, of course, they have started. I mean, Kenya has been the spotlight recently for support, alleged support to the RSF. And the question is, two issues are clear here. The African issue has been always that in some sense, the African states have not been able to scale up norms. We talk about non-interference, we talk about African borderhood, we talk about the sovereignty, territorial sovereignty, which is part of the norms behind the formation of the African AU, and then of course, not to have the AU for the AU, the West African Unity, OAU. But at the level of, institutionalizing these norms and making them reflect in statecraft, that is much wanted. So Kenya has been playing some kind of dangerous game, allowing the group to meet and have meetings. And just recently, I think 2 days ago, Sudan slammed tariffs and restrictions in terms of imports for Kenyan tea and other goods that they buy from Kenya. So that's war. Of course, Rwanda has been also implicated. And then now, the Arab Emirates, there's always a tendency that, in this case, major and medium powers would find fishing ground for statecraft and geopolitical, strategic engagement in this kind of battles in Africa. And again, the warlords themselves would kind of make inquiries and draw these countries to this war as a way of also finding a way to sell raw material for more arms and for control. As of today, the leader of this warlord is perhaps the richest person in Sudan today. And it's interesting that since 2012, a civilian government, these guys have been working together. So the crisis here is there's an enforcement, the poverty crisis, the identity crisis, the ethnic question, the fragility issues, they all build together to make this crisis, these wars and conflicts intractable. And again, the fight now over minerals, especially pure minerals, very rare earth minerals, could feed into this war as it grows. So for now already, some African countries are implicated in very bad diplomatic engagements with the rebels. And the problem here is that there's no clear-cut definition of real government and real government, because both sides have been involved. So you could even be free to be pardoned to say, look, the RSF is it a kind of a guerrilla war? Is it armed forces, which itself lacks legitimacy, so to say, in some sense, since the uprising, coup, and the civilian uprising, and the brutal way it was put out. So this is really a self-reinforcing tragedy that, each of these felons, draw new felons, and each of the crises leads to several other, factors. But essentially, external factors are already, maximizing the crisis in an attempt to get either geopolitical or economic gains, including Kenya at this moment.
All right, let's hear from you, Shadrach. Shadrach, historically, Sudan's military has also played, a decisive role in political shifts. So what role do you foresee the armed forces playing in either legitimizing or contesting this parallel government?
Yeah, so the whole issue on the military trying to also steal the country or steal the government in place in terms of ensuring that the government's place is being upheld. It implies that they will have to put in more measures to ensure that the ISF does not make gains into regions that will end up dismantling the government. The broader picture is to move away from the whole militarization. Also look at past issues that has not led to any meaningful or any form of sustainable peace systems or peace agreements, when you look at how sometimes these negotiations do not have clear-cut mandates in terms of how power is being shared. There is no clarity as to what will happen after peace. These are all issues that the military will want to be on the table for them to be able to negotiate. But in the broader scheme of things, I think support internally is very, very important from the citizenry, because for the army to succeed, it requires that extra work will have to be done. If we look at how past issues have not led to some form of sustainable peace within the country, it will be difficult resting our shoulders on the military the hard tactics way of winning a war, whilst we can win the souls of people who are within the fringes, who are aggrieved by the very issues that has led to the war, including issues of inequality, political fragmentation, the perpetration of power structures that leads to some form of instability when governments are being changed. And many have called for maybe stronger hands towards to go into a negotiation. But I think a softer way of moving into negotiation would rather help. And I think the formation of a parallel government is a non-starter, because peace cannot be negotiated by a party within a war. It requires an inclusive, and it requires all parties on board to be able to ensure peace. So, for me, the RSF move is in the wrong direction, and looking at military tactics as a way of moving forward with the conversation is also not a way that we want to look at.
All right. Now, just before we wrap up, Dr. Bah, from an international angle, or an international legal standpoint, rather quickly, how is the legitimacy of parallel governments assessed? What are the ramifications for Sudan if such entities continue to operate?
These things really has no significance, and I'll tell you why. These are like blusters, these are like talks. What really matters is what happens on the ground. In a way, when you do have a military group or a militia stand up against a government, they are already actually declaring themselves to be a government. Whether they come out in public and say it or not, in the practice, I mean, wherever you have a rebel movement or some kind of rebellion, organized rebellion, it is in effect claiming to be actually the government as opposed to real government. So the declaration really is just, in my view, I mean, this is just a show. This is just really optics. Again, I don't mean to underestimate the RSF. What I mean is that what really matters is what is the military situation on the ground. Now, of course, I mean, Sudan will react in the way, and I think the real issue really is for Kenya, in the sense that, I mean, this kind of optic was hosted in Kenya, and what it implies for how Kenya actually kind of like look or is seen in within the international diplomatic scenes. But I wouldn't put really any more significance to these declarations more than actually what they have on the ground.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us and speaking to us on this. We've had Shadrach Baa-Naa Kundi, Director of Operations and Research, African Center for International Affairs in Ghana. We've also had Dr. Sam Amadi, Director, Abuja School of Social and Political Thought in Nigeria, and also Dr. Abu Bakarr Bah, Presidential Research Professor of Sociology in Northern Illinois University, USA. We appreciate you for your time, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure. Now, that will be all today on The Conversation. You can watch News Central live on DSTV channel 422, Go TV channel 23, Star Times channel 274, Avo TV, and YouTube. Until I come your way next week, I am Darshan Usman. Goodbye.